So following up on our last conversation, like I said, it was a really freeing experience to actually discuss something I've been trying to work on for a while now,
Hmm.
and it made me think like how often when you're trying to create something, are you thinking more from the position of the person who's going to profit from it versus as an artist? Like, for example, there's a lot of times where I'll psych myself out, like in an instance of trying to write a screenplay about pit fighting, of just seeing all the various different ways where that wouldn't be marketable
Yeah.
or how it could be destroyed in production. Like, do you find that you psych yourself out in the course of trying to create because you're more aware nowadays of what goes into creating things or making something popular versus just making something for the sake of making it?
You know, I don't really think of it too much from the perspective of someone like literally trying to pitch something, like literally trying to sell an idea to
Okay.
to someone else who will be providing the resources to actually make this idea into a reality. I don't really think in those terms so much. I think more in terms of logistics. Like I have a really bad habit of coming up with like ideas for movies and stuff, and finding myself hitting a wall because I'm looking at the resources that I have right now and kind of deciding that I don't have the resources I need to do this the way I want it to, so I'm not even going to work on it. But
Okay.
but I keep getting like I'm getting in my own way because the fact of the matter is the idea starts out on paper,
Right.
and all you need to form an idea is just to put pen to paper. So
Well, yeah, and I think it's a little different. Like, I think you're speaking, especially because a lot of your background's in film. And when you're dealing with film, like, there is, that desire to do it right and perfect
yeah,
rather
yeah, yeah.
than, I feel like with writing, it's a little lends itself a little more to kind of half assing at times, and you can always clean it up later.
Well, I mean the joke in screenwriting, like the screenwriter's shortcut, especially for like blockbuster cinema, is you write a paragraph that just says they fight.
Right, right.
And then you leave it up to the actual film directors and the producers to decide the logistics of how that scene goes.
Yeah, and that was very much what I was touching on when I was discussing my thing was that like there were a lot of parts where it's like I have no interest in really fleshing out like how they fight, what moves they do, like how you make it cool.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
all I care about is like it's a major, point. Like, there's a fight, there's something that occurs here. I mean, hell, even for dialogue, like nowadays, I feel like when you have more and more filmmakers who are more willing to allow for improvisation in their acting, even with that, you can have entire parts where it just says they have a conversation over coffee,
yeah, yeah.
So it is kind of interesting. Like, I mean, there's so many different ways you can get in your own head with trying to create stuff. I just know that from my point of view, um, I'll start looking at it and being like, well, this makes no sense because nobody's going to want to pay to see this, or this is too short, or, I don't think this is quite a movie or a series. Like, what the hell is this? Like,
Well, I mean, speaking like specifically about your pit fighter idea that we talked about last time, I think like as like from a producer's standpoint, I think your idea actually has a lot going for it. Like, um, I, I watch a lot of shitty martial arts movies,
right.
and a lot of martial arts in films these days gets relegated to direct to video stuff
Mm-hmm.
because I think we're at a point where like physicality in film and physical performance will always have an audience. It'll always be a selling point, but I think in terms of selling that as spectacle, like
Right.
to like a blockbuster type audience, it's getting harder and harder to do because CG and even just like other forms of stunt work, it's so much easier to wow people with like an Avatar or like any of the Marvel movies as compared to Scott Adkins tricking and doing some flips.
Well, it's like I remember our father was always talking about how some of the contracts of old actors where you couldn't go skiing, you couldn't scuba
Yeah.
dive, and like a lot of the time he would talk about and emphasize that because like for him that was like, well, what's the fucking point? Like, why would you want to make all that money and have all that attention when you can't even enjoy your life anymore? Because those are the things he really enjoyed when he was younger.
Mhm.
And now I mean, these guys are worth so much money, and these gals for that matter,
Yeah.
and it's so much easier to do, like you've talked about in the past, where you just get the green screen out, have everybody show up when they're available, and throw it together in post production. Um, and it's a hell of a lot easier to ensure that you'll have a long-term series with all the same actors that way.
Oh yeah, you preserve them, and it allows them to like you more because you're not intruding on their life as much.
Well, and speaking to physicality, like you're seeing it so much in like sports and things like that now, or even MMA, obviously football and wrestling, professional wrestling, WWE, like you just physicality wise, like people can't keep up anymore because everybody's getting so much bigger and faster and stronger. And I can't imagine if you were an action star like they were in the past, or even a Jackie Chan in his prime, like guys doing all their own stunt work and stuff like that.
Oh, it's such a liability. You can't afford to have Chris Pratt break his head open during filming for Guardians of the Galaxy or something.
Well, and I remember like Jackie Chan too, like the big one. Obviously, we always joke about how like one of the first movies people were exposed to in the States was Rumble in the Bronx, and that was the big one that got delayed because he shattered his ankle or whatever doing stunt work.
Yeah,
and it's like you can imagine the fucking shitstorm that would happen in Hollywood if that happened with like you said, Chris Pratt or
Oh god, that would be terrible. But the point I was trying to make about your movie, though, your pit fighter idea, was that you're starting, I think, from the right place when dealing with like an indie project, like a low budget something or other.
Right.
Like selling the violence and the spectacle of said violence is not the right route to take with a small low budget story like that, because think about what you're competing with.
Right.
Like in the direct to video market alone, you have tons of competing martial arts films with vastly like more talented performers than you're likely to be able to have access to. And I think starting with the characters and sticking with that and using the violence as more of a suggestion, or just for like important emotional beats rather than like spectacle or like set piece moments where it's like you're watching the way these people are moving because it's entertaining you. It's like, no, you're seeing violence and you're seeing how it affects the characters.
I think also too, it's been more fascinating. Like I always allude to this, but like now that we're in the era with social media and all that, like we're starting to actually see the effects it has on how people interpret things. I mean, I'm not going to waste time here talking about how like the fake news garbage and all that, but just like it's so interesting seeing like how people's like first response to things like a tweet or like you'll see people like genuinely get outraged over something that's just 120 characters. It's like how I just, it blows me away like how much like a conveyance certain people take to be like, oh, that's 100% genuine, that's totally how they feel, versus like for me personally, anytime I see a tweet, it's either a seeking attention or it's I had a thought, and I think people need to hear this thought.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
But like I said, for some other people it's like, nope, that's the truth, that's God's word. It's like it blows me away, but it's like fascinating, like actually taking into account. It's like yes, it's easy to say, but you forget that everyone interprets things differently, and sometimes you can just kind of allude to hyperviolence in writing, like a short story, and somebody can piece it all together in their head so fast. Like I imagine you could do that really well, just because you not only watch action films, but you've just seen enough things, media and whatnot, to where you could really put something together in your head, and I wouldn't have to explain a lot to it.
Yeah.
And that's a fascinating thing too, when looking at it from a more indie, like short, project, which I'm still adjusting to even considering, because like when you're young, you just shoot for the moon. It's like, oh, I want to make a full-length movie. I want to make a TV series. I want my band to be playing in Madison Square Garden. Like, when you're pursuing an art like that, you just assume success. It's only when you get older that you really start thinking like, what's achievable?
Yeah. Well, again, I think your idea has a strong foundation as being something achievable, is because it's pretty small. Like it seems like it doesn't have that many characters. It has a few crowd scenes because you have an audience watching these fights, but for the most part it's just following this one guy and his brother, and maybe a few recurring characters like a cashier girl or something that maybe only has to be in 2 scenes, but you just shoot it in a way that you show that this person made an impression on our main character just by being, or just by reacting to him in a way that was foreign to him. You don't even have to give her lines.
That's true.
But it's a small idea that I think is very much doable mostly because you're starting from the right place and you're sticking with it.
Well, and regardless if anything comes of that, because honestly, that's such a like out of my mind. Like that's something I would never consider. But I just think it's kind of cool actually to say like this is a construct of various different things I've taken in. This is what I think would make for a compelling story.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, you know, having actually spoken about it out loud a bit with you and walking through it, like it actually kind of feels like, okay, like I think that's kind of cool. Like, which is not something I'm like really comfortable admitting to. Like, you know, I my default is always assume it's shit unless it's either making money or it's, you know, out there, you know, until it's actually published or converted into a screenplay or whatever. I haven't done shit. You know, I've stared at a computer monitor and had all these visions in my head and have struggled to try to find a way to put it out there.
Well,
and yeah, sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, realistically, like I'm looking at it more from the angle of if I'm going to be a failed screenplay writer or artist or writer or whatever, I kind of like just knowing at least like I had the right ideas there. I just didn't commit to the work. And that's okay because it's not easy. Like, that's the thing. Like, if it was easy, everyone and their mother would be doing it because everyone wants to do that for a living. It's just there's a reason it's only a select few can because it's a grind. It's a mental grind, and that's something not everyone's capable of.
Oh, absolutely not. But, like, I think if you were to commit to writing it, I mean, just the way we're talking right now, it sounds like, you know, you have the enthusiasm, and if you had the prop of being able to hold up the pieces of paper and slam it on someone's desk, I think you actually could attempt to pitch it.
Right.
And really all you got to do is get it on paper and then sell it to someone. Like, just convince them that what I have here in these stacks of pages is worth your time, it's worth your money, is worth your commitment. And then
that's the hang up.
but the cool part is it's out of your hands after that.
That's true.
And then you get to be that bitter son of a bitch that goes like, that wasn't my movie. The movie I wrote was 1,000 times better. And then guess what? You get your idiot brother to film a documentary about you bitching about your movie and what it could have been. And just have a bunch of stick figure storyboards showing, yeah, this is how this scene should have gone.
So I'll be fat and balding and wearing a tracksuit.
Yeah,
and just like
we'll just have like a super close up angle, like a super low close up angle, like that Totino's pizza roll gets.
I'm just picturing a lot of sequences of just like cuts of me just like staring at my phone, like to no way in particular, but implying that I'm like in the process of trying to pitch this still and just like chain smoking cigarettes and like drinking black coffee and just being embittered as all hell.
No,
like,
we need shots of you staring out a window with some handheld camera work, so it's like, oh wow, he's looking at something cool out there. He's got thoughts. And you need you like narrating yourself, like narrating footage of yourself walking through a meadow, and then like a random shot of you like falling asleep in your chair.
a health crisis too.
Yeah,
like
Somebody
hospitalized for like a panic attack or something. That would really put it over.
We need it's a purely black frame, and then a subtitle comes up saying Matthew Hart was hospitalized on such and such date, and then you have the ambulance, woo, woo, woo. and then we have to put up a disclaimer saying we couldn't get the camera in the ambulance because his situation was too dire. Then we need you with a tube in your nose in the hospital still bitching about the movie.
Just like, just so you can hear in the back.
See, okay, now this needs to happen. You need to write a shitty screenplay that gets made so we can make this documentary. That'll be vastly better than the movie itself.
And I guess that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, though. It's kind of like understanding how things work versus actually like just putting out what you want to see. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so fascinating to me. Like, I think we are in a cool era for that. I think that the sad part of it is just the money got to it faster than we were all prepared for. In particular with like the YouTube shit.
Oof, yeah.
Where all of a sudden you saw all these guys, it went from like this cool thing where it's like, holy shit, I can sit down and watch a guy who's pretty similar to me rant about things I care about. Mm-hmm. And then the money got involved, and all of a sudden these guys have like massive productions and green screens, and you look at it and it's intimidating to even consider to try undertake anything, even indie level now, because you can make it look so good from the outright, especially if you have some money to start off with. So, I mean, I think that's the hang up at times, is just like, what's a realistic thing versus, do I actually shoot for the moon here, or do I try to just go this indie route? Which, I mean, look, that what was it? The Venom short they did, the black and white one.
Yeah, yeah.
That was amazing. They also did The Punisher. I forget who the producer is.
Adi Shankar, I think.
Yeah.
He got in some legal trouble.
I imagine he did, because I can't imagine either of those things were licensed. He did some Judge Dredd stuff, too, I recall.
I think that was where it all came to a head, and that's why we haven't heard his name in a while.
Yeah. But, I mean, that was just actually a really cool kind of punk rock thing to, like, just be like, fuck it, we're going to take these ideas. I mean, the screenplay for the Venom thing was blatantly ripped off of this movie Man Bites Dog. That was, I forget what it was, like French or Swiss or something, like Australian, one of those.
Something not American.
Yeah, it was a foreign film. It was a very good foreign film, but it was the exact plot of that, just with Venom, Eddie Brock, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, spinning off from that, we're seeing a lot of these fan projects that, I mean, this has been going on for decades. Like, the most famous one was the Raiders of the Lost Ark fan project. It was, a bunch of kids that for like a decade plus got together and filmed shot by shot, scene by scene, all of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and took it to completion. Recently, they released a documentary following these guys and interviewing them.
Were they fat and chain smoking and bald and ranting and raving about how they could have been something?
It's on my list of things I'd like to see, because
Okay.
this is a trend in films right now. In case you haven't noticed, that I'm actually really interested in is the making of stuff, but also like unmade projects, like movies that could have been like Jodorowsky's Dune is a big example. I have
the Superman one.
I have it on my
the
shelf
Tim
over
Burton
there.
Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess going back before, I don't want to derail you here, but yeah, the Power Rangers one was the big one that our friend we were talking about got in trouble for, right? Just the unlicensed Power Rangers, rated R version. Yeah.
That actually, it wasn't Dread, it was that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But so what I was saying was that, like, that's been going on that long, like since the days of, like, since consumer cameras have been available, people have made fan projects and stuff.
Okay.
Difference is now we have a distribution platform for other people to see this stuff, and since YouTube, there's tons of prospective filmmakers out there that use these fan projects as a leg up to kind of get attention. Because, I mean, Star Wars has generated, like, ungodly amounts of content. Like, there are so many fan films and fan shorts and things like that there's a lot of people out there that, they do it comes from a good place. Like, they genuinely love the thing that they're paying homage to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, if you put Star Wars in the title of any video, the chances of it being seen by people is astronomically higher than if it didn't.
Yeah,
and so
that's very true.
It's kind of like it's a visibility leg up. So you have all these like effects artists that's like, oh, I'll like do the effects work for this lightsaber duel, this 2-3 minute short or something, and I'll get some good stunt performers, and then, hey, you got the right people's attention, and hey, now you have a job doing lightsaber effects.
Well, and that actually, that's an interesting thought too, because that's something I don't think everyone considers. Like, you're, I think, much more well versed in understanding everything that goes into the production of a film. But I think that you are seeing things like that now too, because it's okay for people who have lesser roles in the production of a film to kind of take that mentality of like kind of charging in and being like, this, I do important shit too. Like, I'm trying to think, like the Mortal Kombat one that came out, and that was all the rage on the internet for like a week. But like the big thing that came of that was what they were saying, like, actually we're thinking of turning this into a real thing now because it was decent enough. But I'm just picturing, like, you have all these, like, costume designers who are willing to work for less for the attention you can gain from that, in hopes that they can be a costume designer full-time and
absolutely
make it into a career.
You see it with, tons of cosplay people. That's
They're
a talented costume designer by trade, but how do you get people's attention? You design costumes that people recognize, that you don't have to put some esoteric title or style heading next to. You can just say, oh, Mass Effect cosplay.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what it's supposed to look like. If it looks like it's supposed to, that means you did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, the Mortal Kombat one is like a especially good example because that did start out, I think, as just a web short.
Yeah.
I think it had a Lateef Crowder in it as a Baraka. He's a capoeira guy.
Yeah, with the dreads.
Any movie in the 2000s and beyond that required use of capoeira basically has him in it. But from that short, they went on and they made an actual like budgeted series, and it had like was it Michael Jai White?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think
What's her name from Star Trek?
oh yeah, 709 or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't remember her actual name, but it had some pretty big name stars in it. So like some fairly talented stunt performers, and I think they got 2 seasons out of it, and then it petered out. But I think they were talking about like a TV series at some point. I don't know where that went, but those games are still pretty popular. And then Street Fighter they had like the Legacy short.
Mm-hmm.
Same story as the Mortal Kombat short, where it's just Ken and Ryu fighting in a forest. There's a John Fu and Christian Howard, and Christian Howard, whose face is designed to play like anime / video game characters. Like if you've seen this,
I have no idea what
if you've seen this man's bone structure, it's like okay, it's like that's Ken, like that is Ken. He's even got the eyebrows.
Is he a Hapa guy or is he?
I think he's just a Brit.
Really?
Just a white guy from England. But yeah, it started out Street Fighter Legacy, and then they did Assassin's Fist, which had Akuma and Golken and more Ken and Ryu stuff, and they brought Joey Ansa on board as like the director and choreographer, and then they got another season most recently to promote Street Fighter V.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was called Resurrection. And that one had Alain Moussi from France. Most recently in the kickboxer movie. I was really hopeful to see him because he's supposed to be this like up and coming martial artist in movies, and kickboxer wasn't the best, but you know he's
I'm sure it'll have a loyal Redbox following.
you know Batista was okay in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know it may as well have been UFC cameos. The movie.
Yeah.
It had so many, and like all the fights in it were shot in a way that you could tell it was very safety first.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, Cain Velasquez is an active fighter. It would probably be wise to not get him hurt.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of what we were talking about. It's like the actual execution versus the idea on paper. Like, it's a really cool idea. What was it, Cradle to the Grave, when Jet Li kicks the shit out of half the UFC roster.
Yeah, I think Tito Ortiz was the only person in the cage that took more than one hit to take out.
Yeah.
Like, his whole thing in that movie was he got punched square in the face, and he went, ugh! And he just kind of, like, squinted afterwards. And it's like, oh, this guy's super tough. It's like, that's it. But the worst part about that scene is it kept cutting back and forth between, I think it was Anthony Anderson like trying to break into some place, and then DMX on an ATV, and like
yeah, that's right. He was rolling on.
He's
MTV.
just like bouncing around an ATV downtown
and not doing anything on it.
No.
It wasn't like he was in a car, really chase or anything.
He was just like driving down a hill, and it keeps cutting from like a huge cage filled with like 20 dudes, and Jet Li's taking on everyone, and then DMX on his ATV, and then a fat guy trying to break into a building.
And see, that's a perfect example of why I continue to pursue this, fairy tale dream of wanting to do some sort of creative endeavor, is because shit like that came out and made money.
It made money.
I mean, people paid to make that happen. People got excited about that. Somebody pitched that, and in a serious way actually said, I got DMX, I got Jet Li, I got Anthony Anderson. It's like all your favorite parts of Romeo Must Die together at last. Like,
well, to be fair, I suspect DMX was probably fronting a lot of the money for that movie.
Yeah, you do see a lot of those projects as well.
He actually was kind of the main character of the movie, and I think that was the one that had "It's gonna give it to you" like all over the marketing, and like the final battle again. Like, okay, this is a huge pet peeve for me in action movies: is cutting back and forth between parallel action sequences.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna do it, you got to do it really well.
Yeah,
like it totally takes you out of it if you don't get enough screen time or like enough intimate angles on one scene, and then the other one totally outweighs it, but they're happening simultaneously. Because the end of that movie was like DMX fighting some dude, I think, and then like Gabriel Union fighting somebody, and then Jet Li fighting Mark Dacascos, the Iron Chef chairman. And then he puts a nuclear device in his throat and punches it. But again, the climax was like 3 different things happening at once, and I think most of the screen time was given to DMX.
Yeah.
When you have 2 brilliant martial arts performers that, you know, are just kind of there as window dressing.
Well, and that's, I mean, we discussed it in the past, the Age of Ultron. That's what pissed me off with that, where it was just literally just a giant action sequence where everybody's fighting at once, and after a while you're just like, okay, cool, you blew up a robot, you know. But even more so, like, the Transformers movies.
Oosh.
Like, some of the pacing, though, in their action beats, like, blows me away, because you'll literally have instances where this giant robot will descend from the sky like a Decepticon. Mm-hmm. Like, there's that one when Soundwave, like, lands on Big Ben, turns into a radio tower, starts transmitting shit, and then just, it cuts away. And it's like, what the fuck just happened? Like, you're telling me, like, you're not gonna focus at all at the city? There's not a nationwide panic, like, or worldwide panic? Like,
yeah.
You know, this robot just came out of the fucking sky. Like, and it's things like that where it's just like, and all of a sudden everything freezes that's occurring in London.
Yeah.
And they cut back to Chicago where it's like nothing's occurring and they're just people talking and, you know, things like that where it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, it's like, just focus on one thing, get it over with, then move on. Like, you don't have to have everything going on at once. Like,
yeah, it's very spastic editing. More so than the speed of the editing, Michael Bay's movies have a problem with tonality.
Yeah.
Where, what was it, the second one? They have that one sequence where the dad and Shia LaBeouf have like super dad-son talk. Where it's like, I'm not gonna leave you. It's like, we're in Egypt. There are robots.
But the funny thing with Michael Bay, though, is those moments always get me. Because I just get so caught up in the action element of it that I always end up leaving those movies with like a tear streaming down my face.
Well,
just because.
It's because you watch too much Rocky IV. You're used to Duke acting.
Yeah.
Throw the damn towel! He's cut!
Well, I think it's also just that when you're trying to take in something as big and stupid as that, you do have to just kind of like try to give as much of yourself to it, and in that just buying into whatever they're trying to convey. And that is the funny thing with Michael Bay, is he does try to touch every emotion. He just does it to the furthest extent possible. Like, if it's a scene that's going to be pervy, it's going to be really fucking pervy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if it's a scene where it's going to be really touching, it's really going to be touching. It doesn't matter if it comes out of nowhere. It's like, you're going to feel feelings.
It's kitchen sink filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I would much rather prefer you'd go, you know, turn it up to 11 every time, rather than not try or not bring any sort of inspiration to the table.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of in a similar vein. It's not terribly related, but Batman vs. Superman may be one of the worst edited films I've ever seen.
It seems like all the DC ones in particular. Since the obviously the Batman Nolan thing, but...
Yeah, but man, like, I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but like... If we're talking DC, like, Green Lantern is one of those fuck-ups that's like, how? Like, I don't know how much you know about the movie or if you've even seen it.
I actually avoided it.
Good man.
That was, like, honestly, like, one of the first superhero movies where I'm like, okay, everybody said this is shit.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I wasn't as big into the DC universe as I was Marvel. So I just kind of was like, okay, I don't have the time for it.
You know, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but like just on paper, it's like, okay, Martin Campbell as director. I mean, he's not a household name, so I wouldn't expect you to know him, but GoldenEye, Mask of Zorro, Casino Royale. This guy knows how to make action movies.
I was going to say, those are, you know,
he knows how to make
well.
good movies. Like,
yeah.
Not just action movies. And okay, that's the guy you put in charge. And you got Ryan Reynolds, who has an audience. It's not me. I think he's an okay actor. He's not a selling point for me. Ladies like it when he chops wood. So I don't think he chopped wood in that one. And that's probably why it bombed. but and then, you know, the Green Lantern, like, ethos or mythos is, you know, it's approachable. It's good stuff. But that movie is garbage. But Man of Steel, just plenty of good questions asked. Plenty of good ideas. very poor execution, and they didn't have enough confidence in their filmmaking to the point that the last third of it is just punching and noise.
Yeah.
And it just kind of falls apart. Like they just, I don't know, they again, I think it's a lack of confidence. And then, but Batman versus Superman though is, I mean, it's just bad to the core. Like everything is bad about it. Like the script is terrible. It doesn't really bring any good ideas to the table. It blows its wad in the sense that they throw Doomsday in there. They did the kitchen sink routine in terms of plot structure.
Yeah.
But they didn't earn it.
Yeah.
It's like that was too much too soon. It shows again a lack of confidence.
See,
but the not to talk over you, but the point I'm trying to make about the editing in that movie though is that like the average scene length in that movie is probably like 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps cutting away from everything to the point that nobody talks like a human being in it, where it's just sound bites. It's just somebody says something in a grave tone or says something of significance, and then we're done with that scene.
And see, that's what it's making me think of, and you could enlighten me more on this. I mean, I'm somewhat versed in comics. I haven't read a lot of them in recent times. I feel like I've read enough to be able to discuss them to a degree.
Yeah.
Snyder, the director, he did Watchmen, and I liked Watchmen. I really did. I thought he did a good job of portraying all of the panels of the comic into a film.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he portrayed all the panels of a comic into a film, and that was supposed to be the big one that was impossible to film, and there was no way you could actually make this happen. And he found a way, actually, to do it pretty well at times. Like, I thought the opening sequence in particular was brilliant, where it had the whole Bob Dylan thing, and it cut to all these different things showing...
It was kind of... That scene in particular is kind of significant of all of his strengths as a filmmaker.
Right. But that's what I was getting at is I feel like so much of what made Watchmen an amazing comic series was that all of the characters are based off of well-established comic book characters that everyone should know. It's just they're exaggerated to be the most fucked up version of them. You have like Batman, who's this recluse now who like is terrified of, he's just socially anxious and weird and like kind of retired, so he has no identity. Yeah. You have like the Superman figure who's just this megalomaniac who's just determined to use his powers to the maximum because he can, and he's working for America now. So, you have like kind of like this Joker figure who's somehow recruited for good, which is in a funny way basically what Suicide Squad was supposed to be. But it's showing you all the downside of having this madman like kind of as your head of your military, basically.
Well, it was fitting that Vietnam was the one war that he was actually on the ground for.
Exactly. But it was kind of like, I don't think like he conveyed that as well in the movie. I feel like there's a lot of people who never read the comics who only saw that movie. And you can get a lot of what they're going for with it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that those things were conveyed properly. Like, I think he just gave you the panels and people saw it and they're like, hey, this guy's kind of cool. Hey, this guy's cool. They didn't actually think to take a step back and be like, oh, this is representative of comic books as a whole, and showing you, like, this is what they would really be like if they really existed in the real world. Like, I think that's what the originally idea behind it was.
Yeah, I mean, Alan Moore went on record saying that at its inception, the idea actually was cast with existing DC characters.
Right.
And it was at DC's protestations that he had to change them to unique characters. And I'm guessing that actually plays into how the movie was made too. Is that any of these, big companies that have a lot of intellectual properties, they're very protective.
Right.
And the idea of taking a hugely marketable character like Batman and showing him in a very ugly light,
yeah,
I think DC, Warner Brothers, they would shake their head at that and say, yeah, that's our cash cow. We can't have people looking at him that way.
No, and I get it. I guess what my argument is that like in that instance, it was something that was done over and done with, and yeah, it's finished, so it's easy to just convey every panel of that comic into a film. When you're dealing with modern ones now, like Batman versus Superman, that's an ongoing thing. And you're taking into account, years and years and years of, different various artistic angles on him, different, like, takes. And so he can no longer just put every panel of a comic into a film anymore. he's kind of forced to do all of them at once. And I think that's why you see all these moments where it's like so focused on the guy and he says some gravelly thing and walks off, and because it very much is. That's what you would see in a comic book.
Oh,
you know?
yeah, it's focusing on the splash pages, they call it. It's,
Yes, yes.
And it's forgetting what we talked about last time, the filler.
Exactly.
And that movie doesn't have any filler.
Right.
And yet it's almost 3 hours long in the extended version, and it still feels rushed.
Yeah, and I mean, many ways I felt the same way with Age of Ultron. I'm not going to just shit on Snyder here, but like honestly, it was the same thing with that one. They just were smart enough to get charismatic enough of, a guy in James Spader or whatever to play the villain that the filler roles were dumb and throwaway, but he's still like, you hear his voice and you're just kind of like drawn to it because he's just such a weird, out there guy.
Joss Whedon has a way with actors and dialogue that he can make any product interesting. I mean, he's always criticized for making his characters too witty.
Right.
And, I kind of agree with that. It doesn't feel natural all the time. But the problem with, like, movies like Age of Ultron, and a lot of people have this problem with Iron Man 2, is it feels like housekeeping the movie.
Yeah.
Where it's Iron Man 2 came out at that growing pains stage where they were actually Avengers was happening. Like, it was definitely happening, and they needed to make sure people were aware of it, and they needed to set things up for it. So it's basically an entire movie of putting the pieces in place, and it's like, oh wait, we need to tell a story too. And Age of Ultron has that problem too, where it's like, oh shit, we got all these future movies that we need to set up the ball to get spiked, but we still need to do it within the confines of a movie, and the plot gets lost.
We were talking off air earlier about like Suicide Squad, and I was asking you if you thought I haven't seen it yet, but if you thought that movie was possibly marketed like more towards women in a way than men to try to attract an audience that generally traditionally have not been as excited about comic book films. Reason I ask is a lot of the TV ads featured Harley Quinn. And when you mentioned Iron Man 2, all I could think of was Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, which is such a boring, stupid Marvel character. Like,
it's a interesting character, but Marvel and Disney don't have the balls to do anything with it.
Right.
The whole point of the character is that they have, their morals are a little foggy. They're a little gray.
Right.
But other than paying lip service to that and like a couple of flashback scenes in Age of Ultron, they aren't willing to go into it, and they've already denied they're going to make a movie about the character, so I think they've moved on.
Yeah, but I just mean more so like in Iron Man 2, like they have this like action beat that was kind of just thrown in there for no reason.
Yeah, she got a perm out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it was like she just kind of goes in, kicks a bunch of random guys' ass, and that's cool, I guess, but I feel like that was the pitch at the time, was saying like, yeah, we're going to show she's this feminist hero that like she can kick ass and do all these, but it's like it just comes across as offensive, honestly. I think the intention was to make her a badass, cool, appealing, female lead, but instead all you get is, TNA doing spin kicks.
Well, Jon Favreau likes MMA.
Yeah.
He even self-inserted himself in that scene, throwing some punches, because his character is supposed to be an ex-boxer. But I mean, her character's come a long way. Like, Winter Soldier did her a lot of good.
Okay, see, I didn't see that one either.
You ought to, because
yeah.
I think Captain America 2 and 3 are standouts. I like 2 better than 3, but that's just me.
I have heard nothing but good things with those.
Well,
so.
Winter Soldier does a lot to give her more dimension.
Yeah.
Both her and the Steve Rogers Captain American character, Captain America character, they both modernize them in that one, where they make them more casual. Like they talk like people.
Okay.
Like Captain America isn't always in Captain America mode. He's acclimated by the time they get to that one, and she's his friend, so they talk in terms of being friends.
Okay.
And they flirt a little bit, but it's pretty clear that he's not willing to go the places she is. So,
right. So
I like that they established that there's no foggy area there. It's like, nope, this isn't gonna happen. Just fanboys, just
fuck off.
Yeah, fuck off. It ain't happening. She got a thing for the Hulk.
And it's, I think one of the biggest compliments I've heard for Winter Soldier in particular was that you could have taken all the superhero elements out of that and it still would have been a very enjoyable film.
The weakest part of it is when it goes action spectacle mode at the end.
Yeah.
When it gets big because that's the expectation. Again, what we were talking about, pitching things.
Yeah.
Because when you're making a Marvel Studios production, I think there's a certain expectation that things will culminate like with a certain level of escalation where it's like, no, we can't have a fist fight end this movie like they kind of did, but we also have to have like aircraft carriers that fly and explosions and I mean, like, even Ant-Man couldn't resist it. Like, they still found a way to have it like it culminate in this big crazy shit show.
Well, and I mean, it's the reason Star Wars is so popular, and the reason that why they've churned out so many of these Marvel things is it's the perfect type of film because a parent is willing to take their child to go see these because they never get too heinous with the violence.
Yeah.
It's always so over the top that it's real easy to explain, like, yeah, that guy died, but, he didn't feel anything. Like, which, for whatever reason, like, when you're a little kid, it doesn't bother you as much. Like, when you see a plane blow up, you don't really think much of it, but, like...
Well, G.I. Joe went out of their way to have everyone hop out of the...
Well, yeah, I mean, there was also that element, too.
And then, the Foot Clan and Ninja Turtles, they were robots.
Yeah, exactly, but just you see something blow up or where, and you pass it off, you move on.
You're able to make that... You're able to cut that emotional
as opposed to, like, all the, like, nobody characters that get killed in Disney movies that were always in the most horrific, painful way possible, and you're just like,
have you
oh my god!
No, I mean, like, fucking Uncle Scar in Lion King, he gets mauled by a pack of hyenas.
Honestly, the most brutal one still to this day that sometimes fucks me up, like, when I'm trying to sleep, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, the melting?
Yeah!
Ooh.
With that little fucking shoe thing?
Yeah.
That poor guy who's just like this harmless, happy-go-lucky shoe. Like, it's literally almost on par with, like, apt pupil putting a cat in the fucking microwave. Like, because it is. It's just this heinous, like, torture sequence with this, like, super friendly, cheerful, like, cartoon fit. It's like, it's horrible.
Yeah, and it's a big chunk of it is shown on screen in full glory. Like, it's not it's not implied. It's actually shown explicitly.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was fucked up. That was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But have you seen Ant-Man?
No.
Okay, well, there's a villain death in there that's like, oh my god! Like, if you actually think about the actual physical process in which this person is put through, it's like, oh man, that's awful.
But see, that's a villain. And it's okay to see the villain die a horrible, brutal death, because, sadly, that's what you're cheering for most of the time.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like, yeah!
But then, as opposed to the tour guide in Jurassic World, where that poor lady... Just...
Man, I don't know if, like, that actress and the director, Colin Trevorrow, like, I don't know, like, maybe they had a funny, like, chummy relationship, and I'm picturing this, where, like, the two of them, like, hit it off, and he was like, yeah, you're a pretty cool girl, and she's like, yeah, you're a pretty cool guy, and he's like, hey, you want more screen time? And she's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, well, I got this idea. It's like, I got an idea for a set piece moment. It involves you being killed by the park. Like, killed by everything in the park. Step by step.
See, it's funny because you're not nearly as cynical as me, because my first thought was men's rights activist. He tried to ask her out. She said no, so he killed her in the most brutal way imaginable.
Okay, that's pretty good, too. But...
I mean, I shouldn't say that. That's horrible to speak of somebody who I have no insight into, but it is a funny concept, this guy being like, fine, you turned me down. We'll show you.
He's like, I got you for 2 more weeks. Get in the green screen room. But, no, like... Icing on the cake would be like if at the very end of that movie the Mosasaur comes out and it's like taking out the I-Rex, and then like you can still see her in its teeth. It's like, call back.
That would be amazing.
Continuity.
But yeah, it's so funny, like, when you go through all these and, like, these are the thoughts you have. And, like, that's what makes you think you can actually do it, because you're thinking about more than just, like, sitting back and be like, action. Well, I like explosions.
What's interesting to me about filmmaking, and this isn't true, like, it's just, it can be true, but it's not across the board 100% true, but what's fascinating about it to me is the idea of feeling that things are more intentional in filmmaking than they are in real life.
Okay.
Where there are plenty of directors that thrive on having improvisational acting.
Yeah.
There's tons of scripts out there that are full of holes. They get saved by talented actors and directors willing to trust those actors.
Yeah.
But because of the editing process and stuff, even if you have all that footage, it's still intentional as to what makes it to the final product.
Yeah.
And I think that's what attracts a lot of like type A type people to filmmaking, is that you can take control.
Yeah, you do control every aspect.
You can
of
take
it.
you can take something like life and make it the way you want it to be for a few minutes at a time. And I don't know, I think it's really cool, the idea of being able to structure a scene and have it in your head pictured exactly the way you want it and just work on it till you get it.
That is true.
And I don't know, it's fascinating stuff, and like all the stuff we've been talking about with all these like random scenes and movies and stuff, it's fascinating to me because, you know, we're critical of it, but at the same time it's kind of admirable to know that somebody looked at that. Well, I guess admirable isn't the right word, but somebody looked at that and said, that's how I want it.
Yeah.
But then, you know, there's obviously occasions where, like, in a director's commentary, someone will express frustration, say, fuck, we didn't have time for this, or we didn't have money, or...
And that's the other really fascinating side, when you see, like, all the different ways, like, you have to scramble to make things work. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes it's like, oh, we had to recycle footage from a different movie, or we had to do this, we had to use this set. Like, I mean, filmmaking is really difficult when it comes to scheduling and all that. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, honestly, that's something we could rant and rave about another time, because that can go into various different...
But I just wanted to say that, like, I think it's kind of cool to be able to look at something that someone else made. Like, it doesn't even have to be a movie. It can be a painting or a drawing or a piece of writing, and ask yourself that question, like, is this how this person wanted this to be? Like, is this painting rendered exactly the way the painter wanted it to be? Well, or did it just come together through happenstance?
Right.
Like, and it's kind of cool how it's a measure of both.
Yeah, and actually, beyond that too, like, I was thinking back, you were describing what was it, Green Lantern and the director, but no, like those movies you listed off that you'd done previous to that.
Yeah.
All very solid action flicks. But then you also wonder, like, you know, if you're good at doing one type of flick, because they all have a very similar feel, those ones.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you throw in these CGI effects that you're not as well versed in or confident with, maybe. Mm-hmm. And also, like, or just not familiar with. Because honestly, like, for me, it's like, it's kind of like the first time you play with Play-Doh. Like, whatever you make from it, you think you're the shit, and it's not until you actually go out and look at the box and see, like, all the cool stuff that they make that you're like, fuck, I suck. Like, but I imagine that's what it's like when you get new technology in filmmaking, where you're so excited to use it because, you know, you have a passion for it if you're doing it for a living.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you might not necessarily know how to best utilize it, and you might go a bit overboard, and you might be more impressed by things that really shouldn't be there. Like, sometimes it's more subtlety is better. I think that's what they've learned with the Star Wars thing since Lucas blew it with his original.
Yeah.
You know, was just like, it's like, no, you don't need to keep pushing everything to be as elaborate and crazy as possible. Like, sometimes you can just show, like, a lush green planet and throw in an X-Wing and call it good, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, CGI in particular is one of those tools that seems like it's difficult for some directors to grasp. Mm-hmm. Like, Martin Campbell, like we were just talking about Green Lantern, all the movies I mentioned previously used a lot of practical effects and a lot of, like, in-camera stunt work. And I don't know, maybe it's a case of somebody being more comfortable with doing it live on the set rather than filming it in front of a green screen and hoping for the best when it comes back from the effects team.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, CGI, like, some of the best CGI you'll ever see, like, the most convincing and most appropriate use of it is stuff you don't notice, like the Bourne movies, for instance.
Yeah.
And like, all those driving scenes have tons of backgrounds filled in, like, in the windows of the cars that they're on a green screen set, but because it's edited in such a fashion,
you don't even notice. I actually remember watching one of the award ceremonies, and they were talking about giving the best special effects to A Beautiful Mind.
Oh.
I was like, what the hell? Like, it's like, there's no special effects in that. But then, like, they showed, like, in particular, the major sequence they were referring to, and it was actually a scene where they're washing their child. And it was actually crazy because you realize, like, yeah, you don't want to wash a baby on a live set. Like, that's like a horrible, like, risk, and just asking way too much of an actor, you know, to take a baby's life in your hands. And also, you know, so they did it with CGI, just the water. And it was like one of those things, again, it was done in a way you had no clue. You just assumed they were washing a baby in the sink. But,
Well,
I mean, you know, it was utilized. It worked.
Yeah, I mean, not I don't want to get into it, but the Twilight face was one of the worst effects I've ever seen. There's a child character in it that I think they tried to take Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart's faces and merge them digitally and superimpose it onto this child actor's face.
I don't like that.
It was terrible.
I don't like when they do that. I really don't like it. I mean, the Snapchat filter, basically.
Yeah, it was not convincing. It was very much like Uncanny Valley.
It's like the Paul Walker in the Fast and the Furious too.
Cyber Paul Walker.
Yeah, that's just creepy.
Hey man, they gave him a good send off. They gave him a whole fight scene with Tony Jaa shot at distance in the dark, so you couldn't tell it was a stunt actor. I don't think he was around for any of that scene.
No,
because there's not a single shot of his face in that whole sequence. But, you know, if, you know, you're paying homage to the guy, you may as well send him off and make him look like he can beat up Tony Jaa.
That's fair.
Some of the best effects work, like, I think ILM has been doing a lot of research and a lot of development in basically, like, full recreation or, like, a face replacement type stuff. Like, Captain America, the effect of putting Chris Evans' face on top of, you know, an emaciated body.
Sure.
Yeah. That was thoroughly convincing, and they did the same trick in Winter Soldier with Haley Atwell. They aged her.
Oh, okay.
And the way they do it is they take two performances from two different actors and they have them do the same routine, like the same same blocking, and then they merge it digitally and clean it up. And I'm guessing you haven't seen Civil War if you haven't seen Winter Soldier. Robert Downey Jr. has a scene as young Robert Downey Jr., like Weird Science Robert Downey Jr. And it's thoroughly convincing.
Really?
I've heard, I don't know details because I haven't seen it, but that new Star Wars, the Rogue One, takes it a step further, apparently.
Really?
You know, it's impossible not to get inklings of spoilers thrown at you these days. So I don't know much, but I know that the same, like, similar technology gets thrown out there, and it's something they're pushing for. We're getting into the Simone era of filmmaking where we have fake people. Have you seen Simone?
I remember that was a Pacino one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never watched that.
It was It's Pacino. It's a movie about a director who's supposed to be like an auteur. Mm-hmm. He's supposed to be very eccentric, and he gets gifted a digital human being, so like a digital actress. Okay. So the way he tries to make a movie with a person who's not there, and so they film all the other live actors and just drop her into the scene.
Okay.
And she's like this ultra famous character, like she's this ultra famous personality that everyone in the world wants to meet her because she's this mysterious person. So it's about him trying to like fabricate situations where they believe she's real, like having her do like a stage performance, and like have an actress wearing a hood like run into a hotel like through a crowd of paparazzi.
That actually could be interesting.
It was an interesting concept. Okay execution.
It reminded me of the what was the comedy one? Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy.
Oh, Bowfinger!
I love Bowfinger.
Bowfinger.
Chubby Rain.
Chubby Rain. I love that movie.
But no, I thought that one did obviously a comic take on that, but I thought that was hilarious.
Gotcha, suckers!
Yeah, just the thought of filming a movie around an actor who's not even attached to your work.
Yeah, you just take candid footage of him and then a lookalike, and yeah, you got a movie.
I mean, it's conceivable in the TMZ universe we live in.
Well, it was kind of like ahead of its time in that way.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. Like if you haven't seen it, you should check it out because it's solid. I like movies about making movies, and there's a reason it's on my shelf.
All right,
What
well,
the fuck did we talk about today?
that's never the point. It's
Like-
at the end of the day, it's that you had a
Well, I
conversation.
have to come up with a title for this video / this audio file. Like, what the fuck did we call it?
You just talk about the creative process.
Okay. Sure, we'll go with that.
I mean, because that's the whole thing. All these people who do these things for a living, that's what they do. They sit around, they talk about this shit ad nauseum. I mean, Martin Scorsese sits and watches a shit ton of movies.
Yeah.
And anybody who will listen, he's going to talk to them about movies. And if you ask him, he will give you a list of all the movies he thinks you need to see. And, you know, if you care about your craft, that's what you do. And that's, you know, even if you care about dumb things like Bowfinger and Transformers, you know, it's okay because you're passionate about it. You know,
Man.
you've watched it enough, you know.
Now I know why I don't have that many friends. Like, that must be such a chore to be around. It's like
So you just gotta talk about sports every now and
I
then.
know, but I'm just like picturing situations where I'm at the office and like somebody comes up and is like, "Hey, how about them Seahawks?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, I just watched this Chinese movie last night, and they were speaking 2 different languages, and I was switching between language tracks." And they're like, "I just want to talk about the game."
Yeah. If you watch Game of Thrones,
Oh,
you drink IPA.
every day with this. And then there's me. It's like, so I was watching this movie Bowfinger.
Yeah. You may not have heard of it. It's 15 years old.
Yeah, I got the hipster thing going. It's like, you probably haven't heard of it,
There you go.
but it has something called Chubby Rain. I used that line the other day, and I threw it at Mom, and she didn't know what I was talking about. It was raining, and I was like, she's like, "Oh, it's raining." I was like, "Yeah, it's Chubby Rain." She's like, Chubby Rain?" I was like, whatever, Mom.
See, that's what, you just need a gif of when the guy's face melts. That's all you need to do to convey that movie. Like, if you see that sequence and can't understand why that's
Well,
hilarious.
yeah, that whole scene from beginning to end when the guy comes around the corner and he's like, "Kincaid!" And then he shoots him and he squeezes the squib. Like, they don't even have an explosive. He just, like, squeezes a ketchup packet and falls down.
Well, and also just, yeah, for those of you who haven't seen it, which I imagine are quite a few these
Yeah.
days, like, it's just a scene where they have Eddie Murphy, who plays this actor that is unknowingly in this movie.
Yeah.
And there's a sequence where this guy's being, like, possessed by aliens or something. I forget what it was, but...
He slept with an alien and somehow it took possession of his
So
body.
it's just imagine this guy dressed up as a fake cop who pulls over Eddie Murphy's character, walks out and is like talking to him, then all of a sudden his face just starts melting, but it's like the worst special effects imaginable, and him just going "Ah!" and Eddie Murphy's actor character is just watching it, it's like, what the hell just happened?
And the cop's arm falls.
Yeah, and his arm just falls, but it's like the worst special effects you can imagine.
Oh, it was great. But yeah, see Bowfinger. It's a good movie.
Seriously. And on that note, I think we'll leave you to go out and watch Bowfinger or Transformers or something starring Tony Jaa. Whatever you do to fill your free time. Anyway, thank you so much for listening.
All right. Good night.
Tough guys like you don't get far in this world, mister. Hey, we've been getting pursued by alien forces.
Oh, aliens.
I knew I should never have slept with the alien life form from the star system Neon.